Hello everybody. Today we are going to see a new unit, which is Introduction to Documentation of Systems. Let's see. Directly we will jump to the introduction. Documentation is a process to help users of software and other people to use and interact with system. Effective and accurate documentation is very necessary for the success of any system. Documentation becomes part of each step of system development. Throughout the process of system development, even before the documentation starts officially. During the process of system development, study reports and other necessary information are documented to help people involved in system development to understand the process. There are many kinds of documentation, namely analysis documentation, design documentation, interface documentation, internal program documentation, and user oriented documentation. Documentation should not be seen as an overhead for system development, rather, documentation has to be seen as an investment for the development of high quality software. Now, here comes the objective. After going through this unit, you should be able to understand the concept of documentation, understand the importance of documentation, learn about various documents and process of documentation, understand application of various standards of documentation processes, differentiate between various documentation processes, know relation between the documentation and quality of software, and understand the good practices for documentation process. Now comes the concepts and process of documentation. Documentation may be defined as the process of communicating about the system. The person who is responsible for this communication is called documenter. It may be noted that documenter is not responsible for the accuracy of the information, and his job is just to communicate or transfer the information. The ISO standard ISO/IEC 12207 1995 describes documentation as a supporting activity to record information produced by a system development life cycle process. Why documentation? Documentation is needed because it is a means for transfer of knowledge and details about description of the system to communicate among different teams of the software project to help cooperate audits and other requirements of the organization to meet regulatory demand needed for IT infrastructure management and maintenance and needed for immigration to a new software platform. Document communicates the details about the system targeted at different audience. It explains the system. The ever increasing complexity of information system requires emphasis on well established system of documentation. Every information system should be delivered along with an accurate and understandable document to those who will use the software. Traditionally, documentation was done after the development of the software is completed. However, as the software development process is becoming complex and involved, documentation has become an integral part of each system development process. Documentation is now carried out at every stage as a part of development process. We will also discuss how documentation affects quality of the software later in this section. When the process of documentation is undertaken as a separate process, It requires planning in its own right. The figure below shows how at the development process documentation is done alongside each step. Design and development activities of software depend on a certain base document. Documentation is to be carried out before actually implementing the design. In such a case, any flaw in design identified can be changed in the document, thereby saving cost and time during implementation. If documentation is being developed for an existing software, then documentation is done alongside the software development process. The process of documentation. The following are various steps involved in the process of documentation. Collection of source material. The very first step of any documentation process is to acquire the required source material for preparation of document. The material is collected including specifications, formats, screen layouts, and report layouts. A copy of the operational software is helpful for preparing the documentation for user. Documentation plan. The documenter is responsible for preparation of a documentation plan, which specifies the details of the work to be carried out to prepare the document. It also defines and the target audience. A review of plan. The plan as set out in the process above is reviewed to see that material acquired is correct and complete. Creation of document. The document is prepared with the help of document generator. Testing of document. The document created is tested for usability as required by the target audience. Maintain document. Once the document is created and distributed, it must be kept up to date with new version of the software product. It must be ensured that the latest document is available to the user of the software. So here comes figure 4.1, which depicts various stages of the process of documentation, which involves requires source material for documentation. Then comes planning documentation, review planning, and which goes back if wanted to planning documentation. Then comes develop a document as per the plan, test the usability of the documentation, and then come you can go back if there's a problem. Then after test the usability of documentation, reproduce and distribute document. Maintain the document. Stages of process documentation. So here we come to the part 1, and you can see the answers of check your progress in the description. From there you can solve or check the answers of check your progress. So in this video only till here we will do. In the next lecture we will complete the rest left points. So till then, thank you for listening.